I grew up in Ortonville, Minnesota, and my family is a family that appreciates art and appreciates fine craftsmanship. And so I spent a lot of time in my family's backyard shop watching my mother and father refinish and restore antique furniture. I grew up in a household that had beautiful old objects, and I learned to appreciate that. I started making jewelry at the Milan Village Art School, and I was about 13, 14, 15. And there I had the opportunity to work with an experienced silversmith. His name was Tom Johnson. He was a really loving, caring, patient man, and I was the youngest student in his class. And so he taught me how to make very simple bracelets at first by twisting wire together and soldering the ends. And so that was my first exposure to jewelry making. My first experience studying jewelry abroad was in Florence, Italy. I went first as an undergraduate student studying art history and metalsmithing for a year. And then I applied for a Fulbright scholarship to Kosovo, which is in Eastern Europe, and I was accepted. And when I was there, I worked at a master's filigree studio, learning the art of filigree. I enjoyed Italian Renaissance art history so much that I decided to get my master's degree and go back to Florence, Italy. I worked at Syracuse University and Stanford University as a teaching assistant. And then in my own time, I would apprentice with a Buccellati master in a Florentine studio. And Buccellati is known for hand engraving work. And so I learned from this very old Florentine goldsmith how to use engraving tools and to create this ornate, textured surface on metal. Following my time in Florence, Italy, I became quite curious about Asia. I had never been to Asia, besides my time as a foreign exchange student in Japan in high school. But I really didn't know that much about Asian metalsmithing techniques or adornment traditions in Asia. And so I sought out to apply for a fellowship with the Henry Luce Foundation. I flew to New York City for 2 days of interviews, and I was accepted as a Luce scholar, and I chose to go to India. In India, I was placed at Medanggar Museum Trust, a 15th century fortress that was transformed into a museum in the 1970s. I worked as a curatorial research assistant, and I spent my days in the vaults inventorying and researching about 600 objects of armor, decorative arts, and jewelry. I got to spend my time every day looking at objects in my hand and trying to reverse engineer how they were made and perhaps research who made them and in what region of India did they come from. And so all these things were very interesting to me as a metalsmith. Outside of my time in the curatorial department, I spent time seeking out goldsmiths communities and spending time in their workshops and just watching them make jewelry. I lived in a room that was once one of the many queens of the Maharaja's rooms. So that was quite exciting and inspiring in and of itself. And that's where I made jewelry. I would finish my job around 4 or 5. I would go into the city and shadow the artisans until they closed their workshops around 6 or 7. And then I would go back to my room inside the fortress and I would make jewelry until 11 o'clock or midnight. So I would spend hours into the night, but it was something that I was enjoying it never made me feel exhausted. I felt tired, but I didn't feel exhausted. I stumbled upon a group of goldsmiths that do Tewa work, T-H-E-W-A, Tewa. And it is a technique of fusing 22 karat gold foil that has been punctured into a pretty design to colored glass. And I really enjoyed and was interested in this technique because of how colorful and flamboyant it was. And it's not a technique that is done in the United States. And so I sought to collaborate with these artisans to design a couple Tewa pieces, and I would set them into sterling silver settings and create an adornment using their Tewa art. And so really the goal of my line, Laura Margaret Design, is to combine traditional Indian metalsmithing techniques into a Western contemporary adornment. What I like most about working with Tewa artisans and other Indian artisans is this sort of cross-cultural dialogue that we've created. I feel like I'm highlighting their art and I'm giving it new life and I'm reimagining it. And they're very curious to see Americans' reaction to their art. They ask me all the time, do Americans like this? Do your friends like this? Are they buying your artwork? And I say, yes, they are. They really like Tewa art. They think it's interesting. I feel really grateful that they have trusted me enough to do that. And because they don't know in what form their Tewa pieces are going to take in my necklaces and earrings. I love to come back to Ortonville, Minnesota and to the western edge here and sort of recollect myself, because when I'm out in the world in India or in Kosovo or in Italy, I'm going, barely have time to sleep. It's very overstimulating. And so when I come back to the western edge of Minnesota, it's quiet, it's calming, and I have time to sort of think about what I've done and what I've experienced. The journey that my work has taken me on has made me traverse oceans and go to different countries in search of different culturally specific metalsmithing techniques. And that has given me a great deal of inspiration for my own work as a jewelry maker and metalsmith. And it's given me a wonderful set of skills to create jewelry that I feel has meaning and was made with care and was made with great craftsmanship because of the teachers that I've had in these various countries.
Postcards is made possible by the Minnesota Arts and Cultural Heritage Fund and the citizens of Minnesota. Additional support provided by Margaret A. Cargill Philanthropies, Mark and Margaret Yakel-Julien on behalf of Shalom Hill Farms, a retreat and conference center in a prairie setting near Windham, Minnesota. On the web at shalomhillfarm.org. Alexandria, Minnesota, a year-round destination with hundreds of lakes, trails, and attractions for memorable vacations and events. More information at explorealex.com. The Lake Region Arts Council's Arts Calendar, an arts and cultural heritage funded digital calendar showcasing upcoming art events and opportunities for artists in West Central Minnesota. On the web at lrac4calendar.org. Playing today's new music plus your favorite hits. 96.7 Cram. Online at 967cram.com.